you can see, I've done a little bit of work on this before the start of this particular section. So just to kind of reiterate what I did, essentially I took the sides and folded them in and then stuck them down so that we end up with the double-sided wall on both sides, giving you a little bit of extra strength. And I've stuck those tabs that you saw in the earlier version, and I've stuck them on the deck now. And the whole reason I've put this piece of tape across here is so that we keep the sides, so they keep them parallel at around about, in this particular case, about 28 centimeters at the front and 28 centimeters at the back. The whole point is trying to keep everything as straight as we possibly can. Now, as you can see, well, some of you may be able to see, around the side here I've actually pre-prepared some of my masking tape for the next section that we're going to do, which is going to be actually trying to stick the stern of the boat together. Now, this can be a little bit tricky, so you're going to need to have your pieces of tape pre-prepared, and just make sure that you have the glue to hand and you have the masking tape already cut out in little tiny strips to help you. So first things first then is you identify your tabs and roughly where your tabs are going to go. You make sure they're nice and well bent over, because essentially you're going to lift all this into place and then stick it. Get your glue. Remember, your glue goes off in around about 10 minutes, so you're not going to have a huge amount of time. So plenty of glue on here because you want this to stick first time. So glue on one tab, and then you get your glue on the second tab. Plenty of glue on there. Okay, and then you lift both tabs into place. Now, what you need to do here is you just make sure at this stage that everything is as tight as you can make it, because this will go off in about 10 minutes, and what you don't want to have to do is go back afterwards and try and unglue it, because it actually is really quite difficult to do. Second side, lift it up, stick a little bit onto one side, lift it into place, make sure everything is as square as you can do. You can see that in the camera there. Then the second piece of tape, and just stick it on the side, press it down into place, and then pull it across. And as you can see, already I've got the back end of the boat looking pretty good. Okay, while that's actually setting and going off, you then need to secure the back end of the boat by gently gluing these tabs into place so they kind of sit nice and square. So again, a little bit of glue, a little bit of glue on there, a little bit of glue on this end of this tab here as well. Okay, bend this one up, bend that over, get a hold of one of your pieces of masking tape, and you pull that down and around. And the same on the other side, push it over, push it down, keep it nice and firm, and then bring your masking tape over. And now you've got the stern of the boat, and if you want to, you can actually just put this in there just to hold that down in place, keeping the whole thing nice and firm. Okay, so that's not going to take very long to actually dry, and we'll come back to it in around about 10 minutes or so. Now we come to arguably the most difficult part of this, which is actually working on the bow. Now the bow is a little bit more tricky, on the grounds that this is where you actually have to bend these tabs back in on themselves. So first thing you need to do is make sure all the tabs are freely moving. You're going to actually stick the bottom tabs last, and then you're going to fit these tabs in first. Now, just to kind of show you why I've actually cut that bottom one square, if you cut it so you chop the end off, you end up with a little tiny gap, and that gap is where you're going to put these two tabs. They'll sit inside that gap. So first things first, then you actually put your glue down your tabs, and notice this time I'm putting it on what appears to be the outside. And put a little bit on both, and you give this a little bit of time to soak in. Because it's going on the white side, it does take a bit longer to kind of soak in. And don't scrimp on this. This is going to be what holds the front of your boat together. So you need to make sure you've got plenty of glue on this section. Now comes the fun bit. Bring it around, bring the two tabs in, and then press them in together as best you can. Okay. Bring them in as tightly as you can. Then bring one of your tapes in, pull it across, hold it really tight. Second one, put this one across, squeezing the two together as much as you possibly can. Push that one down, sorry, one of these down, that one over the top, and then you put that one there across, and you're holding the whole thing into place. Now, one of the big issues you might have here, okay, is that may not actually be strong enough. So to make sure that you can hold the whole thing in place, you glue the top tabs down as well. In this particular case, you might need to use a little bit of your black tape to kind of hold that in place. Now again, that's going to take a few seconds or a couple of minutes to kind of go off. So while we're waiting for all that glue to go off, I'll just explain where we're going to go to next. The inside tabs in here haven't been glued at all. And so as a result, you can see that we have this completely open down the side. You just need to make sure that the bow is properly fixed together before you start putting the glue onto those. Now you can make sure that you can squeeze it and get it nice and level on the inside, and the better you get this join at the bow, the more watertight your boat is actually going to remain. Now I've got a little tiny gap here at the front, but don't worry, because we're going to actually put a nice piece of black tape down that join come the end. Now already the back end has actually started to go solid, and as you can see, we've got our boat with its join down the side here and join down the side there, and these joints are going to be open to the actual water. So to make sure we get a decent seal on those, we're going to now start to use our black tape. Black tape, get it roughly the right length, and the whole point here is you've got to try and get this on to this as best you can. Okay, so 1 second. That tape should now be able to just lift off. Okay, there you go. Tape here, just lift it off. The glue's nearly gone off and nearly set. Okay, get out of the way. Now this is just to make sure you get a good join between your tape and your cardboard of your boat. On, press it down firmly, and then move it out across the joint. Tidy that up in a minute, but hopefully you can see. Just put a second one on. Make sure my joint is sealed properly. But you do this all the way around so that you end up with all of your joints have actually got some tape over them, at least 2 thicknesses deep. Now we're going to do the same on the other side, and we will then put some more glue into these front flaps, and the whole lot then will be simply glued together. So we'll come back and I'll show you how that's done at the in a minute, but that hopefully will give you some indication of how you put the bow and the stern together. I've now glued up all the joints. As you can see, I've put a little bit of extra tape on the bow, and I've actually put a little bit of extra tape on the stern. I've removed the 2 straps in the middle here because the first thing I'm going to do now is actually put in a couple of bulkheads. Now the bulkheads are there simply to give the boat a little bit of rigidity, because imagine if this boat actually gets quite long and you're going to build something with a cockpit, this section here, which is not going to be around about 70 centimeters long, about 50 centimeters long as it is at the moment. It's going to be 130, maybe even 140 centimeters long. So it's going to need a little bit of strength in there to stop the boat twisting. So to do that, we need to make up some bulkheads. Now these bulkheads are actually made up of 1 sheet of cardboard. Ideally, you should mark it up on the cardboard side. Unfortunately, I was in a bit of a hurry, so I've actually marked it up on the facing side, but that shouldn't make a big lot of difference. You're going to paint all of this anyway. You measure the depth at the top, or the width at the top, the width at the bottom, and the depth of the actual walls of the boat, and then you simply measure it out. Now I've actually you'll notice here I've left a section here around about 3 centimeters wide, and that is to glue the foredeck to this bulkhead once all the things are in position. I've also put some flaps on the side, some tabs on the side here, because that's going to stick to the side of the boat, and I've also got some tabs here that are going to fit and stick to the bottom of the boat. So once you've got it sorted out in terms of drawing it, you then use your scoring tool. Remember our little hacksaw tool here, and you score it up so it actually ends up folding up something like this. Make sure your tabs are all easy to move, and then simply drop it into place. Now, this may take a little bit of doing to start off with, but the key idea is you maneuver it into place. And you might have to do a little bit of extra cutting just to kind of tweak it, but at the end of the day you should be able to get your bulkhead in, something like that, and this should level up roughly with the top of this. Don't worry about these little tabs on the side here, you're actually going to use those later on to kind of hold the whole thing together, and that should fit in there quite firmly. So when you put your glue in a minute, that's actually going to keep that absolutely rock solid. You then also take the measurements at the stern. You also measure the depth of the height of the actual walls as well. You measure the width, and you make up a second bulkhead. You drop that one in, and you maneuver that one around into place as well. And you again do a little bit of cutting, extra cutting, to kind of get it into place. But the point is that again, all of this should roughly line up. Now because the stern is actually going up slightly, we're going to need to trim a little bit of our tab on the back here. Trim a bit there, and we're going to trim a little bit here. Just be careful with your knife again. Very, very easy at this point. Get a little bit overzealous and end up cutting yourself. You're very close to the end of the job now. Okay, that's looking much better. Okay, again, don't worry about these little tabs on the side because we can actually trim all those off, and that fit should be quite nice and firm. So next thing would be to glue these in place, and once you've got those glued in place, make sure you pull the tabs down on either side there and glue those as well to the side of the boat, and you can glue these to the side of the boat as well, or if you want to you can cut them flush. The next part is you turn your boat over and then you trace the bow and the stern, and this will give you your foredeck, which will fit on quite nicely there, and notice it overlaps with our bulkhead, so when you glue that in place and you take that in place, that whole unit there becomes a really strong piece of the boat. You may have a little bit of overlap, but you can trim that with your knife at the end. And at the stern you've got a slightly different arrangement, because here you're trying to actually tidy up the back end and give yourself a very strong rear to the back of the stern to the back of the boat. There is my stern plate, my quarter deck, so to speak, and notice I've actually rolled this over so it actually rolls, and the idea here is I put it into place, press down as firmly as I possibly can, and again I'm going to glue and stick that firmly to the back of the boat. So by the time I've done all of that, I trim up any excess cardboard, I tape any of the joints, and I end up with a boat that looks something like that. Now if you give me another 10 minutes or so of your time, or another 5 minutes or so of your time, when you come back I'll show you what the finished boat will actually look like. Thanks very much.